Good. Well, here we go. We're about 3 minutes early, but I'm trying to start this at 9:45. Let's Judges. I guess we're on Judges 2, about 15. Is that correct? Is that right? Let's just start with a 14. Judges 2:14. I think that'll get us through. That will give us a frame of reference to move on. To Judges 2:14. There's some baptisms today. Anybody in here being baptized? Any of you guys? No? Okay. You too? Good. I knew we had a couple. Good morning. I feel quiet in this Presbyterian church this morning. Here we go. Joshua's already dead. There's not a clear-cut leader like they've been used to having over the last several decades. Moses died. Joshua was raised up. Now Joshua's dead. Here we are. And it says that this made the Lord burn with anger against Israel, so they handed them over to the raiders who stole their possessions. King James says spoilers. He turned them over to the enemies. Their enemies all around, and they were no longer able to resist them. The enemies overtook them because what they started doing was following after other gods. They got worldly. Every time Israel went out to battle, the Lord fought against them, causing them to be defeated, just as He had warned, and the people were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges to rescue the Israelites from their attackers. Yet Israel did not listen to the judges, but prostituted themselves by worshiping other gods. How quickly they turned away from the path of their ancestors who had walked in obedience to the Lord's commands. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge over Israel, He was with that judge and rescued the people from their enemies throughout the judge's lifetime. For the Lord took pity on His people who were burdened by oppression and suffering. But when the judge died, the people returned to their corrupt ways, behaving worse than those who had lived before them. They went after the other gods, serving and worshiping them, and they refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. So the Lord burned with anger against Israel. He said, because these people have violated my covenant, which I have made with their ancestors, and have ignored my commands, I will no longer drive out the nations that Joshua left unconquered when he died. I did this to test Israel, to see whether or not they would follow the ways of the Lord as their ancestors did. That is why the Lord left those nations in place. He did not quickly drive them out or allow Joshua to conquer them all. Verse chapter 3. These are the nations that the Lord left in the land to test those Israelites who had not experienced the wars of Canaan. He did this to teach warfare to generations of Israelites who had no experience in battle. These are the nations, the Philistines, those living under the 5 Philistine rulers, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites living in the mountains of Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath. These people were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the commands the Lord had given to their ancestors through Moses. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they intermarried with them. Israelite sons married their daughters, and the Israelite daughters were given in marriage to their sons, and the Israelites served their gods. So the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. They forgot about the Lord their God, and they served the images of Baal and Asherah poles. Then the Lord burned with anger against Israel, and He turned them over to the king Cushan Rishathaim of Aram and Ariathim, whatever. And the Israelites served Cushan Rishathaim for 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, the Lord raised up a rescuer to save them. His name was Othniel, the son of Caleb's younger brother, Kenaz. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he became Israel's judge. He was the first judge. He went to war against King Cushan of Aram and the Lord gave Othniel victory over him. So there was peace in the land for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's relative, died. And here's what happened. If you'll remember correctly, we were talking about how God brought Moses through the children of Israel through the Red Sea, and they brought him out of Egypt. The generation died in the wilderness. Joshua was a part of the generation, him and Caleb, that was raised up as leaders and had a different spirit. They were not afraid or intimidated to cross over to Canaan. God had already told them, we're going to prepare a whole group of people and a land over there for you, while your ancestors for 40 years were wandering in the wilderness. Over there, we're going to have them go ahead and build you some cities. They're going to build you roads. They're going to build you highways. They're going to build you bridges. They're going to build you businesses. They're going to build you marketplace. They're going to build you ports. They're going to build you all the things, agriculture, technology, architecture. All those things they're going to build for you. And when they build for you, I'm allowing those people to build it, because when you get there and finally get there, you won't have to start from scratch. You'll just take possession of really what already is belonging to you, right? So what he's really saying is, listen, while you're in your rebellion, your journey, you're not prepared yet, you're not ready to consume and take over all the things that I have for you, I'm still not going to let you go, without. I'm going to go ahead and go before you and prepare a way, so when you get there, you'll be ready. In other words, you guys might think you've been on a path for several years and you've been off the journey, or you've been on a journey but off the path, and you think, God, how can I ever make up for lost time? Well, what you don't know is what God is doing in the area of where you're supposed to be or will be is already being prepared for you to get there when the time arrives for you to get there. He'll redeem all of that. You won't have to start over scratch. Gosh, I'm 40 years behind. That didn't happen to them. So for 40 years in the wilderness, the generation dies, but while that's going on, something's happening over in the promised land, or the land of promise. Okay? So Joshua comes now on the scene because Moses dies. Joshua takes him across the Jordan River, and now you have the 12 tribes. He conquers a lot of the land, but God didn't let him conquer and drive out all the people, because God knew this day here was coming. So Joshua dies, still land to be conquered, but all the 12 tribes of Israel and the half tribe of Joseph, 2 tribes of Joseph, which is 13 tribes, Joseph's 2 sons, then what happened was they were able to establish and settle in that area. So each person now, each tribe, each family, each clan now has its own territory, and now it's difficult because now we got to drive out those people that are in that area. Well, here's the problem. The leader that got them there was Joshua. So for generations, they had always had a person they could look to. Moses. He's the man. Moses, he's our guy. Then Joshua, he's our guy. Joshua dies, and now what was supposed to have happened was all these tribes were supposed to occupy their own land, but their king, their leader, was really going to be God. God never intended for them to have a man to lead them. It was God's intention for him to be their God, and the family or the clan or the tribe always observed the statutes and commands that he'd given them, and remember the covenant that he made with all the people. Don't serve other gods, and worship the Lord your God only. Remember what I've done for you. The problem was, when Joshua died, these people started, because they didn't drive out all the world, the inhabitants of the land, they began to mingle with the inhabitants of the land, and they began to cross-pollinize. And what they did was, they started mingling and commingling and cohabitating with people of those areas. So the sons started marrying the daughters of that land, and the daughters started marrying the sons, and it got really polluted. So when that happened, they ended up leading, and they ended up worshiping the gods of that area. So instead of them influencing the culture that was there, that culture began to influence them. And they became converts from a God of covenant with Jehovah God to the God of Baal and whoever else was there in those areas. Well, God's anger was turned towards them, and God knew that, and I don't know if you all know this or not, but when you're disobedient and you're not following the will of God in your life, God always has an enemy. You'll not just come to your senses just because you have a moment of, oh, I need to come to my senses. There will always be an enemy in your life that will cause you to have to fight. And when you have to fight, it brings you to your senses. Okay? I'm not saying that he will bring bad stuff on you, but he will use that. The enemy is trying to take you out, and he will allow that to come. Because if you don't know how to fight, and when I say fight, fight the fight of faith, if you don't know how to battle, if you don't know how to win, then something's missing in your life, and you don't know how to sustain. You'll never sustain unless you know how to fight. Okay? And have a victory. So these enemies were in the land, and God preserved those enemies, and every time they would fight, the enemies would overtake them. And it wasn't, if you notice, it didn't say that the enemies were better than them. It said God would allow them to overtake them. Right? Why? Because they were doing what was wrong in the Lord's eyes. But it was never God's will for them to be overtaken. It was God's will for you to do right in God's eyes. That's basically what he's saying. So the people cried out to God. Now they start turning back to him. Hey, we realize we're in a mess. The spoilers have spoiled us. We know about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We know about Moses. We know about Joshua. But here we are, and God, you brought us here. You've given us this. I'm talking about generations have gone by now. Decades have gone by, and now they're crying out, going, God, we got to have something. So God raised, because that was their frame of reference, God raised up a man. And he called him the judge. And he was from Caleb's family, because Caleb had a different spirit. Okay? Caleb knew how to fight. So he raises up Othniel, and for 40 years, that Othniel was the first judge and the judge of Israel, there was peace for 40 years. Look what happens, though. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. And once again, there's no man. They didn't know how to worship the Lord without somebody governing them. Once again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, and the Lord gave King Eglon of Moab control over Israel because of their evil. Eglon enlisted the Ammonites and the Amalekites as allies, and they went out and defeated Israel, taking possession of Jericho, the city of palms. Now, wait a minute. That's the city. That was the first city they took over. You remember? But they marched around Jericho 7 times for 7 days. And the last day, it was 6 days. On the seventh day, they marched 7 times. Do you remember that? And all of a sudden, boom, the walls come falling down. They go in and they just take it, and boom, it's theirs. That was under Joshua. Now, the land that they had owned and possessed, now they've lost. Now, keep in mind, an entire generation for 40 years had already gone by under Othniel, right? Othniel was the judge, so 40 years, not 4 weeks or 4 months, 40 years. And the Israelites served Eglon of Moab for 18 years. Now, think about it. That's 40 years. They had peace with Othniel. Now God they did evil in the sight of God. God turns them over to the Moabites. Now it's the Moabites took over at Jericho, and now for 18 more years. You see how time is just ticking by? Okay. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, the Lord again raised up a rescuer to save them. Every time they would cry out, God would hear their cry when they cried with sincerity. His name was Ehud, son of Jerah, a left-handed man of the tribe of Benjamin. The Lord rose up a rescuer to save them. Left-handed man of the tribe of Benjamin. The Israelites sent Ehud to deliver their tribute money to King Eglon of Moab. In other words, taxes. So Ehud made a double-edged dagger that was about 1 foot long, and he strapped it to his right thigh, keeping it hidden under his clothing. He brought the tribute money to Eglon, who was very fat. After delivering the payment, Ehud started home with those who had helped carry the tribute. But when Ehud reached the stone idols near Gilgal, he turned back. He came to Eglon and said, I have a secret message for you. Now watch this. So the king commanded his servants to be quiet, and he sent them all out of the room. The only thing that's in the room now is Ehud and the king. Ehud walked over to the king, who was sitting alone in the cool upstairs room, minding his own business. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. As King Eglon rose up from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, pulled out the dagger, strapped it to his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. The dagger went so deep that the handle disappeared, beneath the king's fat. So Ehud did not pull out the dagger, and the king's bowels empty. You don't read this in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, do you? Then Ehud closed and locked the doors of the room and escaped down the latrine. After Ehud was gone, the king's servants returned and found the doors to the upstairs room locked. They thought he might be using the latrine in the room. So they waited. But when the king didn't come out after a long day, they became concerned and got a key, and when they opened the doors, they found the master dead on the floor. This time Ehud was able to get away. While the servants were waiting, Ehud escaped, passing the stone idols on the way to Sarai. When he arrived in the hill country of Ephraim, Ehud sounded the call to arms. Then he led a band of Israelites down from the hills. "Follow me," he said, "for the Lord has given you victory over Moab, your enemy." So they followed him, and the Israelites took control of the shallow crossings of the Jordan River across from Moab, preventing anyone from crossing. They attacked the Moabites and killed about 10,000 of their strongest and most able-bodied warriors. Not one of them escaped. So Moab was conquered by Israel that day, and there was peace in the land for 80 years. After Ehud Shamgar, son of Anath, rescued Israel, he once killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. And Ehud's death, the Israelites again did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord turned them over to King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagamath, Sisera, who had 900 iron chariots, ruthlessly oppressed the Israelites for another 20 years. Then the people of Israel cried out, here they go again. You see the cycle? They do right, and they get help. They cry out, they get help. That time passes, transition takes place in culture and life. Somebody raises up, dies, somebody moves, something happens. And then they go back to being evil again. Then they get in evil for a decade or 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, whatever the time might be. And then finally somebody rises up and says, we can't live like this anymore. Something's got to change. And what do? They cry out to God again. And what's God do? He's faithful. He'll raise up someone. Every time he hears the cry, he raises up somebody to get them out of the mess that they're in. But it's such a cycle of life, and this is no different than it was back over in Egypt. It was no different than when they were coming through the Red Sea and Moses. It's in the heart of people that if we don't have direction and vision, and we don't have ideas of where we're going, it's easy for us to fall back into the lap of mediocrity or of regression. And we can't do that. You've got to have a forward-thinking mind of where you're going. So the people of Israel cried out for help. Deborah, here it goes, another judge. This was a woman. Deborah, the wife of Lepideth, was a prophet who was judging Israel at the time. She would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for judgment. One day she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, or whatever, who lived in Kadesh in the land of Naphtali. She said to him, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors, to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him. Barak told her, I will go, but only if you go with me. Very well, she replied, I'll go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. See what's happening there? We're going to have a showdown. There's a fight happening. They come to Deborah as the judge. She was judging Israel at the time. She would sit under a palm tree, or a tree, and she would sit under it, and she would judge them. They would bring all their problems to her, and that became the courtroom. So when she judged it, she became had developed such a positive reputation of impact that Barak was a guy that was also in the military, a part of the government. They came to her and she said, hey, here's what the Lord said. Not only was she a judge, she was a prophetic judge. So when she came to him, and then she goes, this is what's going to happen. So she began to prophesy for action to take place. So she tells Barak this, and Barak says, I'm not going unless you'll go with me. Why? Because they had so much confidence in her, they didn't have confidence in the word that she had spoken. Sometimes you can have so much good confidence in the people than the word that was spoken from the people. And before you know it, your confidence is more in them than what they're representing. Does that make sense? You should always have confidence in the word of the Lord more so than the person, because the person is just a person. They're a vehicle. Vehicles break down sometimes, right? With the word, it's never. It's forever settled. So she tells him what to do. Then she even kind of chides him a little bit, and he says, look, if you'll go with me, I'll go. She said, I'll go. But she said, but you're not going to get any honor for this. They're going to know a woman went with you. So that's just going to cheapen your victory. But you'll get a victory, but it's certainly not going to bring honor to you. He said, I don't care. I'm going. I want you to go. I want you to go anyway. So at Kadesh, Barak called together the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 warriors went up with him. Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite, a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law, Hobab, had moved away from other members of his tribe and pitched his tent by the oak of Zaanannim near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, he called for all 900 of his iron chariots, all of his warriors, and they marched from Harosheth Hagam to Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you. So Barak led the 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. Sisera leaped down from his chariots and escaped on foot. Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to Harosheth Hagim, killing all of the Sisera's warriors. Not a single one of them was left alive. Now watch. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. I'll tie this together for you just a moment, if you'll let me go through this. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, come into my tent, sir. Come and don't be afraid. So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. Please give me some water, he said. I'm thirsty. So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. Stand at the door of the tent, he told her. If anyone comes and asks you if there's anyone here, say no. But when Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and a tent peg in her hand. Look at this. Then she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground, and so he died. Now, you got, in chapter 3, you got a guy with a big old dagger sliding it into the gut until someone's bowels fall out. Here, you got a woman taking a hammer and a nail and pounding it in the temple of a person's head till he dies. It's pretty graphic stuff, isn't it? I mean, think about it for a second. This is some serious stuff. And I haven't even talked about the typology of what it means on the gut and the bowels falling out. I haven't talked about the temple of the head. I haven't talked about all that stuff. We don't have time to do that today. But there's a significance of where it was and why it was done that way. Yes?
Just a silly question. Why, when he wanted water, she gave him milk?
Yeah.
Behind that we don't know.
Yeah, I think there is. And in fact, when I was even reading it, I was just about ready to point it out, but I'm not sure exactly what the revelation is behind that. That's a good question, though. He asked for water to drink, and she gave him milk from a pouch. It's a good question. Next scripture. So on that day, Israel saw God defeat Jabin, the Canaanite king. And from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin until they finally destroyed him. Next chapter. Okay. Now you got to keep in mind, this is jockeying for position. This is learning to live in an occupied territory when you're cohabitating with all kinds of different people from different backgrounds, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, all the ites. Now you're in their world. It's a symbol, it's a type of the church living in the world, but not of the world. Right? How do we live in a society and a culture that has all kinds of things that are not what we believe? How do you function and live in a culture, in society, in the world, where what you see, not everybody lines up with the way you're supposed to believe as a believer, as a Christian, as a covenant child of God? You have the Muslim faith, you have the Buddha faith, you have the atheists and the agnostics, you have humanism, you have moral relativism, you've got all these different ideologies and religions that represent something, but yet we are over here representing God, and we have a relationship with God. So in the midst of all this land that's promised, you have God's people infiltrated in a society and a culture where they were supposed to take it over. Now they're being absorbed up in it. And it's a constant battle for leverage of who wins. Make sense? On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. Israel's leaders took charge, and the people gladly followed. Praise the Lord. Listen, you kings, pay attention, you mighty rulers, for I will sing to the Lord. I will make music to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you set out from Seir and marched across the fields of Edom, the earth trembled, and the clouds, skies poured down rain. The mountains quaked in the presence of the Lord, the God of Mount Sinai, in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, and in the days of Jael, people avoided the main roads and travelers stayed on winding paths. They wouldn't even go down main roads. They were so afraid. There were few people left in the villages of Israel until Deborah arose, look at this, as a mother for Israel. When Israel chose new gods, war erupted at the city gates. Yet not a shield or a spear could be seen among 40,000 warriors in Israel. My heart is with the commanders of Israel, with those who volunteered for war. Praise the Lord. Consider this, you who ride on fine donkeys, you who sit on fancy saddle blankets, and you who walk along the road. Listen to the village musicians gathered at the watering holes. They recount the righteous victories of the Lord and the victories of his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord marched down to the city gates. Wake up, Deborah, wake up. Wake up, wake up, and sing a song. Arise, Barak, lead your captives away, son of Abinoam. Down from Tabor marched the few against the nobles. The people of the Lord marched down against mighty warriors. They came down from Ephraim, a land that once belonged to Amalekites. They followed you, Benjamin, with your troops. From Akur, the commanders marched down. From Zebulun came those who carry a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah and Barak. They followed Barak and rushing into the valley, but in the tribe of Reuben there was great indecision. Why do you sit at home among the sheepfolds to hear the shepherds whistle for their flocks? Yes, in the tribe of Reuben there was great indecision. Gilead remained east of the Jordan, and why did Dan stay home? Asher sat unmoved at the seashore, remaining in his arbors. But Zebulun risked his life, as did Naphtali, on the heights of the battlefield. The kings of Canaan came and fought. At Tanakh there are Megiddo springs, but they carried off no silver treasures. The stars fought from heaven. The stars in their orbits fought against Sisera. The Kishon River swept them away, that ancient torrent, the Kishon. March on with courage, my soul. Then the horses' hooves hammered the ground, the galloping of Sisera's mighty steeds. Let the people of Meroz be cursed, said the angel of the Lord. Let the earl utterly curse, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty warriors. Most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. May she be blessed above all women who live in tents. Sisera asked for water, and she gave him milk in a bowl fit for nobles. She brought him yogurt. Then with the left hand she reached the tent peg, and with the right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera with the hammer, crushing his head. With a shattering blow, she pierced his temples. He sank, he fell, he lay still at her feet. And where he sank, there he died. From the window, Sisera's mother looked out. Through the window, she watched for his return, saying, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why don't we hear the sound of chariot wheels?" Her wise women answer, and she repeats these words to herself. They must be dividing the captured plunder with a woman or two for every man. There will be colorful robes for Sisera and colorful embroidered robes for me. Yes, the plunder will include colorful robes embroidered on both sides. Lord, may all your enemies die like Sisera, but may those who love you rise like the sun in all its power. Then there was peace in the land for, another 40 years. You getting this? The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. 40 years on, and then it went off. 40 years on, and then it went off. Every time, you're going to see through this whole book, because we're getting close to getting into Gideon, and we're going to start getting into Samson and some other judges as we move on here. And these are the stories that you know. But you've got to realize that Israel had judges to rule. And when I say judges to rule, I'm talking about people that would judge the issues of the land. But the people always were looking for a king. Anytime there was not war going on, anytime that there was a change in power, when somebody passed away, somebody rose up, somebody went away, every time there was a change, the people did right what was in their own eyes, and there was an argument and a fight. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. This is about 11 o'clock. Because you're seeing this all across the land right now. You're seeing a lot of uprising, and I think I've got a little bit of insight, I think I do, from prophetic insight, on why all that's happening and what it looks like and what it means, and how relevant it is today, and how it just applies to the Bible. Look at your own life. If most people do not know how to live in freedom and responsibility, they only know how to live when it seems like we don't call upon the name of the Lord or call upon the Lord when things are okay. We really call upon the Lord when things are not okay. Now, it's not that we don't love him, and it's not that we don't acknowledge him. It's not that we don't attend his church. It's not that we don't worship and sing and praise and read our Bible. But when things are down, you start to have a tendency to grip the horns of the altar and say, I got to have some answers here. And our seriousness towards God happens. But here's what typically takes place. When things are kind of off of us, and I don't mean completely free, I'm talking about when pressures of life start lifting from us, then what happens is sometimes the enemy sends in other things that takes the place of your fervor and passion that you had for God when things weren't so good. And that stuff has to be shifting. We've got to learn to praise God and worship God and be attentive to God when things are good. Otherwise, if God knows and he learns us through our relationship and knows us through our relationship, if things aren't so good all the time, then he'll know when things aren't good. It kind of draws us to him. Then he's not going to bring you things in your life that will ever take the place of him in your life. Right? I know a guy from Kentucky, and he hit the lottery. You guys probably remember this. If I don't even remember his name, I just know of him. Actually, his girlfriend used to rent from me years and years ago, and he hit the lottery, and when he did, it destroyed his life. He couldn't handle the success. And I know so many people. I'd be in Bible studies with people down in Kentucky, and one of the main topics where this is all going on was one guy says, God, I hope God never brings me more on me than I can bear. You know the scripture says he'll never put more on you than you can bear, but he'll always provide a way of escape. That's not always bad things. It's not like God says, I'm going to put some sickness on you. I'm going to put sickness on you so you see how much you can bear. But I'll never put more sickness on you than you can bear. And then I'll provide a way out for you. He doesn't work that way. That's not the Lord. What he'll do, though, is he will not put more on you. He won't give you, if you can't handle a wife, there's a good chance he's probably not going to give you one. Right? You can take one, but you got to show yourself worthy and not prove yourself, but that he's going to be first in your life in all things. Or his life, he'll be first in your life in all things. That's important to him. So I don't give Caden things that I know they're going to be a distraction to him, or I try not to. Or once I do, and I realize it's a distraction, guess what I do? I pull it away real quickly because I can't let it be a deterrent for what really the overall picture for his life, because he doesn't know better for himself at this point like I do for him. And God does the same thing for us. Right? So you heard the song Garth Brooks sing, some of the best, thank God for unanswered prayers. There's a lot of prayers I prayed, and I thank God for them not happening. Man, I prayed when we first started the church, I was praying for a particular thing to happen, and I was binding and loosening the devil and everything else, and come to realize, God, I was wrestling with the Lord. It wasn't the devil. And I look back and I think, God, thank you that did not happen the way it was supposed to happen, or I thought it was supposed to happen, because if it did, then, and I had people give me prophetic words saying it was supposed to happen, which confirmed everything in me. Oh, yes, I'm with you. And I look back and I go, my God, if that would have happened, we'd have went down a whole different direction, and we wouldn't have experienced what we're experiencing now. So I thank God that didn't happen. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be fervor and zealous and go after it if you feel it's God, but you just got to trust that the Lord knows the way. Amen. Right? And he knows how to get it to you. He knows how to get it from you that's going to harm you or hurt you. Does that make sense? The Lord's good, and he's faithful. Now, as we talk through I don't want to go any further in Judges today, because we're going to stop at chapter 6, because I'm going to get into Gideon, and then it starts really breaking down for us, because these are really strong lessons, and I don't want to just minimize it in 10 minutes. But I want to do this. I want to talk real quickly about how you recognize that you can trust yourself with things that the Lord is bringing into your life without letting them take preeminence over the God who brought them into your life. Right? See, we're in a place right now of society and life and culture that things are happening so fast that's really making people's heads spin. And you're not going to be able to stop the blessing of the Lord coming to you if he desires for it to happen to you. It's just happening at rapid speed. So you got to get to the place where your endurance is stronger than you've ever had it, and you're going to need to minimize the things that are distractions in your life. Okay? So when God is trying to bring something into your life, opportunity, job, education, relocation, whatever it might be, you've got to make sure that your heart stays single and your eyes stay focused with the vision that God has got for you. And your vision has to become more than just fixing problems that are current in your life. Your vision has to become where you're going, not just, I need this solution fixed or problem fixed, I need this solved, I need this off of me, I need that happening. God doesn't need micromanaged. Your vision needs to be from a macro perspective. Where are you going? Where do you want to go? What is the desires of your heart to see happen in your life? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or a year? And then some people are going, man, I can't see myself after past today. I'm just taking one day at a time. I'm just trying to get through today. Well, for a season, that's not going to be a bad thing if you're in a real bad place. But you can't stay there, because you'll live life aimlessly, and then you'll be dodging daily bullets as opposed to going, this is where I'm headed. So the way the country has shifted, the way leadership has shifted, and I'm trying not to get into an 11 o'clock message, but I can't help but do this. When Moses was raised up and brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, there was a dispensation of time. There was a moment in time that was a reality and it was happening. So when Moses goes to the elders of Israel and he says, listen, you guys have been crying out for God to bring you out of Egypt. Come and follow me. It was a real life happening. It was a current event during the time, right? We read the scripture sometimes and read the Bible as if it's such a historical document and reference that we forget that those people had to live in the moment. That was a real current event. That was really happening during that season. During that time in life, those people had to make a conscious decision to say, yes, Moses is raised up. We're currently under Egypt, and we're tired of living under this. We got to go. So when Moses says, come and follow me, I'll bring you out of this place, they had to make a conscious decision, pack up and follow him, or stay there, right? They come through the wilderness for 40 years. They're fighting. They had opportunity to go 11 days to get where they were going, but it took them 40 years. It was a real-life event. Joshua was there in the meantime. Joshua and Caleb go to the promised land, come back and give a report. 10 other people gave an evil report. Joshua and Caleb gave a good one. It was a real-life current event. If Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC and all the others were there reporting live what was really taking place, it would have been something along the lines of, Caleb and Joshua had just returned today. The 10 other spies went with them. We're waiting to hear the outcome of the meeting, and all of the United States, of all people, all the Israelites, would be us. We'd all be looking at the TV going, wonder what they said. Wonder what they said. So we'd have to hear the talking points of all the commentators and analysts, and hopefully some leaks that would come out from the behind-the-scenes stuff, so we could make our assumptions of what was really taking place, because it's a real-life current event. So when they come back and they said to Caleb and Joshua, it's split. Caleb and Joshua said we should go, but the other 10 said we should not, because it's too big. We're like grasshoppers in their eyes over there. We're small, they're big, they're giants. The fruit is good. Can you imagine that taking place in real life time? Right? We read that like it's such a historical document. We're forgetting we're writing more Bible today. I can fast forward this thing to you into decades and centuries until Jesus' time. Take 10 years before Christ, and you got a 25 or 30-year-old adult living life and having a family, a Jewish person, living God. Yes, this is wonderful. And all of a sudden, there's this baby born, a real-life baby being born, not a nativity scene that we celebrate, a real-life happening. Right? So those people had to live in a time when something was forever changing. The course of history was being set. It wasn't just a frame of reference, it was a current frame. Am I making sense? Today, 2017, is a current frame that we are living in. But if we don't learn to look back and put ourselves in the past times and live in them for a moment as current times to see how those people thought, we'll just live life right here and have to wait to get past this season to reflect back to this season to find out really what took place. We should be setting course of future and writing history, recording history every day of our life, right now, rather than somebody having to come back and tell us what happened once we moved on. Am I making sense? This is important. If I could just get the church to be current, that's my goal in this season that we're in. I just want you to be current and relative, realizing that you're calling the shots. You're not handed the shots. You're calling them. Right? Man, this is good. I just need it to be current. I do. I don't need us to look back 10 years ago as if it was, oh gosh, yeah, that was a bad time in history. I mean, Huntington we're writing history for Huntington right now. What are you writing? You're writing history for your life right now. What are you writing? And what will be 5 years from now that you'll look back and wish you could rewrite it? Write it now. If you don't If you don't like what you're doing right now, that will be written about you then change now so it will be different then. Right? I'm not talking about just your good stuff. I'm talking about all your stuff. Boy, it is. We are Presbyterian today, aren't we? It's quiet. I don't mind Presbyterian. I love Presbyterian. Let's pray. Let's feel led to pray. Father, what exactly are you doing? You got all these people living today with their heartbeats, their eyes open, living life, just trying to figure out this whole system of life, structure of life. Some are taking one day at a time, moment by moment, actually. Some are such a visionary, and they've got it all planned out years from now. And Lord, you got all kinds of different people. And when we survey the landscape of society in our city, in our nation, in the world, it makes it sometimes difficult to believe it's possible for you to get the glory that you deserve. Lord, one person, one group of people, there's no way could try to fix all the problems in the world. It's impossible. But with God, it's possible. So, Lord, how are you going to reconcile this? We see a deficit. We see bankruptcy, overdrawn. We see big time in the red. And I'm not talking about just money. I'm talking about life. You got people under it. They don't know how to get over it. They've worn out all their avenues of reasoning and trying to figure it out and ideas. They've worn them all out. Lord, how are you going to wake people up to live the current life without regretting their yesterday and hurrying up trying to get past their now? How are you going to do it? And Lord, we're looking for some instruction from you to set up this generation and generations following, that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every time a generation dies off. So Lord, would you just give us some clear, direct instruction and help us to discern what you're really doing across the land, that we don't have to get caught off guard, and we don't even want to hear the talking points anymore, Lord. And we appreciate the Gospels. We appreciate the letters from Paul that was written in Peter and John. We appreciate all of those. God, they're great reference points. It's the Word of God. It's infallible. It's life. But God, it's got to become more than just a reference point. And your people right now are aimless, trying to figure this thing out. And I'm asking, Lord, for you to give a fresh perspective. In Jesus' name. Amen. See you at 11.